Welcome back. Should you be new? Welcome in the first place. A rather belated episode. Going to be looking at the third album by the band in the ongoing series. I think I just called the band, imaginatively enough. Stage Fright, released in 1970. So, first of all, apology for the rather large gap between episodes 2 and 3, but summer holidays, and then literally days before I planned to have this up, Robbie passed away. So that felt more important to commemorate at the time. So this one is still for Robbie, so hence the Somewhere Down the Crazy River t-shirt. But let's crack on. Best way to pay tribute to someone like that is to talk about their actual legacy, which is of course the music. So not going to be talking about the Stage Fright 50th anniversary. My plan is to cycle back round and talk about bonus tracks from the Capitol series, such as these releases with all the bonus tracks and the box sets. So the wonderful remasters, some questionable choices regarding tinkering with track listing, etc., etc. So the plan is that those will be covered in a separate affair towards the end of the run. But for the moment, let's go back. So Stage Fright, the album as is, 1970. So Robbie essentially is your complete band leader at this point. He has a co-writing credit on absolutely every track on here. The two tracks that Richard Manuel co-writes are the last things he would ever write, which is rather tragic to think about when we're still relatively, what, only about a year and a half into their kind of career as the band, and yeah, Richard Manuel's dried up already. It's really, really sad how quickly Whispering Pines turned into not but a whisper and then nothing at all. But c'est la vie. So Robbie wanted to push, according to Robbie, again, a reason why I didn't want to talk about this so close to his death is that this is where cracks start to emerge in the relationship, and I'm certainly not going to go down the route that every band conversation turns into of are you pro or anti Robbie. We don't need to be. We can acknowledge that differences and factions emerged without having to pick sides. We can just document it, and that's what I hope to do. So Robbie pushed the idea of the other guys waiting with him, because it was evidently clear that now they had some free cash, they were enjoying the fruits of their labour a little bit too much. So Rick, Levon, Richard, constantly getting into bother, constantly out of their faces. So Robbie was not terribly happy with proceedings. But the idea was he would coerce them almost by offering the chance to do B-sides, by offering the chance to have the album opening track, side openers or side enders, if they would come up with material with them. I don't know, that seems a bit laborious to me. It seems like if they couldn't come up with the material, they can't come up with the material. Offering those kind of incentives probably isn't going to do much for them, especially someone like Levon, who's not a noted writer anyway. And Richard, sadly, his body of work as a writer doesn't match his actual legacy as a wonderful performer, an iconic performer in my eyes. But the tracks that we do get, so first of all, the album. No, we'll come back to that. We'll circle around to that. Strawberry Wine as an opener. So that here straight away we get the idea that Robbie is indeed letting one of the other guys have a bit more of a spotlight for having given him something in terms of a co-write. So Levon and Robbie do the co-write on Strawberry Wine, your opener. It's not a great track. It's very much a standard rock and roll boogie good time track, but like almost everything here, it's brilliantly played, wonderful texture. Garth just brings some gorgeous stuff, and Robbie's guitar stings are probably the jaggiest they've ever been. Some of his playing is just intense here, it's just brutal. Levon's voice on Strawberry Wine is very different to where it had been on the band just a year earlier. Lots of commentators, including Grail Marcus, I believe was on Cream at the time, if not Rolling Stone, he hypothesised that the same effect was happening to Levon that happened to Ray Charles, where his voice became more honeyfied due to heroin abuse. Levon was using heroin around this point, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Regardless, it does take away a little bit of the edge of Levon's voice. So I don't. When we go back to tracks like "Look Out Cleveland" from the previous album, you can certainly hear a decline. Temporary, I'm glad to say, but a decline nonetheless. Then we go into one of Richard's co-writes, "Sleeping," which is a brilliant melancholy song. The kind of song that Richard was best at. These fantastically deep but intensely dark little slices of paranoia and isolation and wistfulness. There's a real intense brooding darkness to a lot of Richard's lyrics and his music. I think the lyrics were mostly Robbie, but a lot of Richard's storytelling, even the musical storytelling side, it's very modern. From our point of view, it would fit in so well with songwriters of the modern generation, like Sufjan Stevens and the like. He's got the, or even Bonnie Prince Billy. He's got that kind of sensibility where the melancholy drives him, and he explores the depression and the dark side of existence, which unfortunately would take its toll later on. But while it's happening, it's glorious to hear the Richard as an artist do so. I mean, "Sleeping" is one of his best vocals in terms of mixing the soft with the more aggressive, and when it all kicks in the choruses, Garth just joins him, and it's just a cacophony of noise, but it's intense and it's almost schizophrenic, which, yeah, don't want to be armchair psychiatrist, but very much part of Richard's psyche, I'd imagine. "Time to Kill," very slick, very polished, very Rolling Stone friendly, but so infectious. It's got some wonderful country playing by Robbie, very Carl Perkins like in spots, and Rick and Richard do it as a double track vocal, which is just wonderful. They're so tight on it, they sound great. One of the great things about the band's harmonies are that they never feel the need to go so close that you can't really tell them apart. You can always tell the band's harmony. That's one thing I really, really love about them. You can always tell who's where or when. They're very distinctive, even though they're harmonising. Comes from the staple singer's approach. You don't need to sound like the person, you just need to work with them. And yeah, it works perfectly on "Time to Kill." I think that was their biggest hit single in terms of European success. I'm pretty sure "Time to Kill" got to something like 17 in the charts, and I don't think they ever got higher than that in America. But "Time to Kill," you can see why. It's a perfectly 1970 type track. It's not too old-fashioned for the mainstream. It's not too weird and coated with Garth being pure Garth for the mainstream. It's very contemporary. It could be by a lot of Laurel Canyon type acts. So "Time to Kill," yeah, it's a good one. Again, we'll come to the wraparound once we finish track 10, but just another whistle stop. It's all very well done. It's all very well played. It's not a great song. It's not even a good song. I think it's the first clunker from the band, and it's the first time where I think, I don't think you had 10 tracks here. I don't think you had 10 tracks. I mean, there's some great lyrics, but what it feels like to me is a track like Ruben Ramus from the Basement Tapes. It feels like a mess around that works in terms of exploring the strange, weird old America, but it doesn't work in service of this kind of album when they're trying to be a more contemporary outfit. It really doesn't, and it just stands out, and there's nothing memorable about it at all, unfortunately. Yeah, it's a clunker. Sorry. All the Glory. I mentioned that Levon's voice would recover lickety split, and it sure does. So Robbie wrote this song, "All the Glory," about his daughter, his new baby daughter, and gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. Levon sings it so tenderly. I mentioned on the last episode about. I'm going to link below to the previous episodes in the comments because it has been a while. But I mentioned in Whispering Pines that Levon doesn't get the credit he deserves as a very tender singer. So much more than just the hollerer, the shouter, the stomper. Here he sings a beautifully subdued ballad, a lullaby. It's absolutely gorgeous, it's delicate, it's fragile, it's glacial, but it's warm, it's autumnal, it's just beautiful stuff. It's a little bit, all the glory, second story. I mean, it's a little bit annoying in terms of, it's a bit cutesy, but if you can't be cutesy over your newborn baby, when can you be? So I totally forgive Robbie's indulgences there, especially when it leads straight into the shape I'm in. Dun, 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 dun. Go out yonder. I mean, one of the Eternal Band songs, a real stomper from Rich Emanuel. The kind of song that normally would be given to Levon, but it works so well having Richard doing this kind of thing here, because he gives it more of a gospelly vibe. When he's singing, I'm gonna go down to the water, but I ain't gonna jump in, no. I just be looking for my maker, and I hear that that's where she's been. Oh, it's got a wonderful church revival feel, which Levon could absolutely do too, but Rich gives it much more of, again, a Ray Charles kind of vibe, I think. He gives it that R&B feel that, again, Levon can do, but just does differently. It doesn't feel countryish at all in Richard's hands. It would have in Levon's hands. Brilliant track, one of the band's most eternal songs. I don't think it's quite one of their best, but it's easily one of their most fun ones. I always associate it with Cripple Creek. I think they're very much the same type of song. It's very much the Cripple Creek of this album. W.S. Walcott, Medicine Show, one of the tracks that is probably, if you think of what a band song is, this is the kind of song you're imagining. So it's full of iconography from an ancient Americana, medicine shows, the Klondike Ku Klux Steamboat Band. Once you get it, you won't regret it. W.S. Walcott, Medicine Show. He always holds it in a tent. Wonderful storytelling from Robbie in terms of bringing to life these stories that Levon's dad had told him about the way things used to be down south. And if you've seen The Last Waltz, which I'm presuming a lot of people watching this video would have done, when Levon talks about medicine shows and what happens after hours when things get a little bit raunchier, that's exactly what you get in this song. It's a depiction of that. Just talking about the weird and wonderful characters of the American medicine show and revivals and carnivals. It's just Americana 101, played brilliantly. Garth throws in some wonderful esoteric and oddball organ sounds that just, wow, who else was thinking of these ideas? Daniel and the Sacred Harp, very Faustian. From a lyrical point of view, Robbie had a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and always would do, over his lack of formal education. So he read a lot and saw a lot of world cinema to try and pick up what he thought he'd missed, and you can hear that in here where he's expanding on ancient mythology, Faustian pacts and whatnot, and making a deal with the devil, almost. In this case, Daniel and the Sacred Harp. Daniel makes a deal to get the Sacred Harp, but he doesn't have a soul anymore. He doesn't even cast a shadow. And one of the great things about this track is that it uses the band as characters. So Richard, Levon and Rick all play characters in Daniel's journey. So Levon kind of narrates it, while Richard is playing Daniel himself. And then they all come together for those Daniel, Daniel and the Sacred Harp, dancing through the chorus. It's wonderful. Again, this is something you very much think of as Band 101. So back to back, W.S. Walcott and Daniel and the Sacred Harp, very much two 101 band songs, just atypical band songs. Stage Fright, the title track, is a showpiece, of course, for Ricky, and it's very much the kind of track that's perfect for him because it's vulnerable, it's open, it's a little bit naive, but celebratory at the same time, celebrating the fact that he does get to sing just like a bird, even though he does have the stage fright. So it kind of celebrates that kind of performance, and it is a little bit biographical. It's Robbie writing about his own stage frights and his own anxieties. I'm sure most people know the story about Robbie and the first ever band performance as the band at was it Winterland or was it the Fillmore? I think it was Winterland. Yeah, it was Winterland. Of course it was, because they brought around the Last Waltz full circle, didn't it? And Robbie had a bit of a disaster, so he did have stage fright. So he writes about it here, but it applies much more to Rick's persona. It applies much better to Rick, and Rick's vulnerability as a singer brings a lot more cadence to it. It's a stunning song. Again, it sounds very contemporary. It doesn't sound old-timey like a lot of band songs. It sounds very contemporary. Rick gives it that desolation, but with a little bit of a wink, which only Rick could do. So it's all very well having three great singers in your band, but three great singers that can do totally different things, that's an absolute gift. And it takes us into The Rumour, which again, like Daniel and the Sacred Harp, sees the band utilise our three singers here. So it's a very dark song, it's a very brooding song, an intense song, and it has Rick, it has Levon, and it has Richard. So they're all singing parts here, so there's no lead singer. But when you get the now when the rumour comes to your town, it grows and grows, where it started no one knows. So they're doing that part, Levon and Rick, but then it cuts, these parts are amazing, when it cuts to Richard for the close your eyes, hang down your head. Again, he's doing a very Ray Charles kind of thing in the vocal. Until the fog rolls away, let it blow away. Almost under his breath, let it blow away. Just rolls into it. And then it gets a bit like King Harvest, again from the band, from the Brown album. It gets more desolate and desperate with every single chorus. So each time Richard sings and punctuates it, each time it gets more desolate and more desperate. He sings louder, he sounds much more volatile, much more desperate. It's a gorgeous song. It's a hard song. Like a lot of this album's deeper places, like Sleeping, it's a hard song when you know the story of the guys and where they were at this point and where they would ultimately go. But I'll close the tracks down there and I'll talk about the album, just overall thoughts. So it was produced by Robbie, but it was engineered by Todd Rundgren before he was quite Todd Rundgren. So it's the year before the Ballad of Todd and Runt, and it was mixed down by Glenn Johns. So you're dealing with big names, not quite yet, but for Todd, but big names regardless, and very mainstream names, and that's really the difference in this album. It does contemporise the band a lot more, apart from a couple of tracks. It takes their identity, that the Brown album scene, and it does put much more into the time and place that the album was recorded. And for me, it loses a little bit of the magic because of that. It doesn't have the same depth. It doesn't have quite the same interest. But it's an odd one because the individual parts are absolutely fantastic. 9 of the tracks are good to great, and it's only just another whistle stop that lets it down remotely. But I think it was Barney Hoskins, don't hold me to that, who said that this is the album where you start to hear the friendship coming out of the music, and I think that's true. It sounds a lot more like a conventional recording. We're losing a lot more of the caller response. We're losing a lot more of the individual parts. And you jump in halfway through the line here. There's a couple of tracks where they sing together, but not much. It feels much more by design, and then just come in for an afternoon and do your parts and leave and go and get shit-faced. And unfortunately, that is kind of the story of the album. It's not organic like the first two albums. It's not eternal like the first two albums, and it's the first chink in the armour, really, after two masterpieces. But then, can you really ask for much more than making another really, really, really good album? I think that's unrealistic and unfair. If anything, it just shows they were human, which, I don't know. Never let them see you bleed, Q said to James Bond. And I don't know, this is the first sign of blood in the Bandcamp. Somebody should launch a website called that. Yeah. I wonder if the initial plan that Robbie had to record all the new tracks as live in Woodstock, I wonder if that would have made it a little bit more vital and a little bit more exciting, hearing them play off each other. Who knows? Would have been interesting. But we'll wrap that up there. So that's episode 3 in the can. Again, we're going to come back to that at some point, because this has easily got the most controversial 50th anniversary box set edition. The others have been, relatively straight remasters with a bit of remixing, but this one, Robbie went to town. So we'll come back to that at some point. And then next up, and believe me, it won't be so long next time, we'll do it. October is going to be a lot of movie stuff for Halloween, but we'll try and do it in October. We'll do Cahoots next month, which I'm a little bit contrarian with Cahoots, but we'll go into that closer to the time. So again, yeah, I mean, it's a brilliant record. It's just not a masterpiece. Is that criticism? I don't think so. Folks, thank you very much for your attention. Let me know your thoughts on Stage Fright by the band, any particular favourite tracks you may have, etc, etc. Again, I will link below to the previous videos via, I'm sure I've made a playlist for them, and you can watch them. Thank you very much, and arrivederci Roma.